Today I'm upgrading my main daily driver desktop core with a new processor. After hearing about Zenbleed in the news, my processor happens to be affected by this specific vulnerability. Prefer not to wait till December 2023 for an update to the BIOS for the vulnerability. The other issue is that when we do this update for the BIOS fix, it will most likely impact performance. The newer generation processors are not affected by Zenbleed vulnerabilities, and my current processor is an AMD Ryzen 3900X. I'm upgrading to an AMD Ryzen 5900X. So let's get started with taking this apart. We're going to bring it over to the bench, and we're going to just take everything down and take it apart and replace the processor out. Hopefully all the licensing will stay in place. Before you start upgrading your system, you want to make sure that your BIOS is up to date. This system, the BIOS is not up to date. It is on 2/28/2023. The newest BIOS version is available for just this month, 7/4/2023. We're going to download and install the newest BIOS update. To do that, you're going to go to your website. You're going to go to a Google search for your manufacturer plus your motherboard. In this case, this motherboard is an MPG X570 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi, and the current BIOS is 7/4/2023. This version's here. We're going to download that, and then we're going to put it onto a flash drive and then put it onto the system, the current system. First of all, you're going to plug in the USB flash drive, and then you're going to run a program called disk part, and we're going to list the disks, and you're going to select the USB flash drive. In this case, it's disk 1 because of this file size, and then what we're going to run is we're going to call it clean. Clean is going to erase all partitions and all data. It is very fast to do that, so be sure that you're on the correct disk before you run that command. You're going to exit that. You're going to go to disk management after that. To do that, you right-click the start menu, and then you can go into disk management, and you can create the new simple volume. Keep it simple, just D drive is fine, doesn't matter. In this case, we're just going to leave it NTFS, but usually you'll want FAT32. If that's the case, you want to make a smaller partition. You want to make a, let's say 2 GB partition, and it should allow you to do FAT32, and you can put the volume label whatever you want. And next, quick format's fine, hit finish. It's going to create one small partition. That's what we want, because whenever you do a BIOS update, you want to have FAT32 as the file system. And it is. I just thought I did that, but maybe it wants FAT. Okay, that's okay, it doesn't matter. All right, so let's just take the BIOS. We just unzip this file. We're just going to take that BIOS, throw it onto that flash drive, and we're going to bring this flash drive over to the new system. So now what I want to do is, when we're in the BIOS, we're going to basically go down to mFlash. It's going to say, do you want to go into mFlash mode? Yes. Reboot. This is normal, it's going to reboot. This mode is very simple, as you can tell. So you want to select your BIOS, which in this case is right here off the Kingston drive that I put in. It says, do you want to run that? Yes. It's going to start upgrading the BIOS. During this time, while you're upgrading the BIOS, make sure that your system is plugged into mains power, that you are not during a lightning or a thunderstorm, or if you're going to lose power, this is not the time to be running a BIOS update. If you have a UPS battery, that is the best solution for running a BIOS update, just to be sure that your system is 100% on stable power. This may take a little bit of time. It'll go all the way through, and it may do 1 or 2 reboots. This is normal. Still installing. Do not take out the USB flash drive as the instructions are there listed, and also do not power off the system. Wait until it fully reaches 100%. It will reboot once or twice, so during that time, just don't touch anything. Just wait for it to fully say it's finished. And you want to do this before you upgrade your processor, just so that you make sure that you have the most current processor set. Okay, once the system's back up, you want to go back into the BIOS. Nope, it's going through a second reboot, I think, yep. Okay, now what you want to do is go back into the BIOS, verify that the new build date is correct, which that is correct. It also reset all of my settings, which is a real pain. But for now, we're going to leave the settings the way they are because we're going to be now changing out the processor. Now, before you do the actual physical hardware change out, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a paper towel. You're going to need isopropyl alcohol. I recommend 99%, but you can get whatever you want. You're going to need a screwdriver, maybe a knife, probably a cutter just in case you need to get around wires, and your processor, of course, the new one, and some gloves for cleaning up the thermal paste that I'm using is Corsair's TM30. You can use whatever thermal paste you want. I recommend choosing a name brand thermal paste just in case for the best type of heat transfer. All right, let's get started. Okay, this computer case has a glass side panel, so we're going to take the glass side panel off very carefully. I'm going to clean up the entire case as we go also, just because it does need a little bit of a dust clean out. This system also has a all-in-one water cooler, which we will have to be careful of taking apart. So seen here, this is basically your water. This is the all-in-one water cooler going down for the tubes going for the front radiator. We're going to take this off, and then we're going to just swap out the CPU, clean off the paste, put the new paste down, and then boot it up, and hopefully everything will work. So let's disconnect this. What we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the little USB connection, and we're going to try to leave the power connectors, but if we can't, we'll have to kind of like fish those out from the back there and disconnect over here for the pump and fan. So let's unplug. There are more cables with an all-in-one water cooler. It just happens to be that way. If you've done one of these before, you'll know that it is a little bit of a mess. Just don't lose any parts, and be careful to unscrew stuff correctly. Let's take that all the way up. Okay. Okay. Probably shouldn't leave the metal pieces down there. That's okay though. For right now, we're just gonna pull these cables up. Oh, this one's a little tight. It's around this stupid thing. All right, let me try to get this one up at least. This one is for the CPU fan pump. This is probably for the lighting or something. Where is this going? It's going back there, of course. Let's see. Yeah, that cable's going to be a problem. Kind of figured. Okay, let's put it back down for a second. Go to the other side and then try to pull that cable. This cable seems to be stuck on something on the other side. So let's take a look at the other side and we not drop the screws that were in there. And it's the little nuts out. These little nuts, you don't want them flying around the inside of the system. Okay. Okay, now we can lift it up. Just keep that attached there so it doesn't fall off. So I'm gonna turn this. I had to put one of the screws back so I can turn it over so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. I'm just gonna get the right screw. This thing actually requires this SATA connection here, this SATA power connector, which is actually running across the CPU. So we're gonna just disconnect this for right now so we can get the CPU out. And I feel like this is also, these fans are probably a problem, but maybe we won't need to do that. This is Corsair's old system with a whole bunch of power just for basically all of the RGB, which is really annoying. It was not worth the time and effort. Anyway, let's flip it back over. And let's get that out. And let's get the CPU out. Be very careful when you're moving the machine around, of course. You want to make sure that you're not getting stuck on things. Oh boy, there's 2 cables. All right, we gotta flip back over again. This is what sucks about this. Just because it has a screen and it has RGB, it's like really ridiculous. So it's 2. The fan connector also has to be unplugged just to pull this CPU one cooler out. This is why we don't sell many of these. It does help with performance, but it is really annoying to deal with. Hopefully that's the right one, and hopefully I don't have to undo this one. We will find out right now. Let's flip it back. That was right. Okay, those were the 2. So let me show on here. Those were the 2 cables that I needed. This is just power for the screen, and then power for the pump. Much as for the, actually, wait a minute. That one's for the pump. Oh, this is for the speed for the fans, the control for the fan speeds. So yeah, you need like a bunch of different things for an all-in-one cooler, especially when it gets advanced like this, when you have a screen. If you don't have a screen involved, you have a lot less cabling, so I recommend not getting one with a screen. It's really annoying. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna have to take this off, which we can now pull off. When we do that, we are going to clean up the thermal paste. So I'm gonna use some gloves because thermal paste, when you get it on something, it never comes off. It is really a pain. So be sure to use some plastic gloves, some disposable gloves, and be careful what you're touching with this, because obviously you want to make sure that you are not touching anything in your case. You don't want to have, you know, this thermal paste, this gray thermal paste all over the place. It's not going to really damage anything. It's just going to be really just messy. So let's take this out of there for a second. Get the last screw that I put back on. I'm going to take that back off. Come on. That's a lost screw. Okay. That's going to pop right off. Should pop right off. That's going to be a little messy. So you're going to clean up this side. You're going to take all this paste and you're just going to wipe that off. And then you're going to also do the same thing for down here on the CPU. You're going to wipe that off. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, put it onto the paper towel, and then wipe it off using the paper towel. You do not want to pour this directly into the machine. It's probably not a good idea. It's not going to really ruin anything, but you're just going to make a mess. And you're going to have to wait for it to dry, all that stuff. So you don't want to do all that. You want to make this quicker and easier and just clean all this off. It's going to be messy no matter what. Get everything. I put way too much paste on this first time around. When you put too much paste, it's not going to destroy anything. It's just going to get gunky like this. It's going to look messy. And you know, too little paste though is bad. So too much paste is never a bad thing. It's just it'll make squeeze over and stuff. That's clean for now. I mean, I really should clean it a little more, but we're going to repaste it anyway. So if you hate the smell of a doctor's office, this smells exactly like it. Anyway, just wipe that off. You should also use a paper towel that has less fibers. This paper towel has too many fibers, but I also soaked it in alcohol. I'm just gonna clean up the sides of the processor a little bit. Okay. Ah, it's still a mess. All right. Going to use another piece that's just empty. I'm gonna pour a little more on. Making a mess already. Trying to get off as much as I can. All right. It's good for now. It's not the best. I really would like to get more in there, but I'm going to use probably a Q-tip later. Clean that up. All right, so let's take it out of the socket. Let's replace it with the new one. The new one is right here. This doesn't have a cooler or anything. It was bought straight for this purpose. No waste of money. Where's my knife? Knife, here we go. All right, so let's open this up. Get the processor out. You may want to check your gloves, make sure you don't have any of the thermal paste on it. In this case, I did not get any on there. I usually wear the gloves just in case. If you do get thermal paste on your gloves, swap out your gloves. Do not keep touching things with thermal paste on it. You're gonna end up with gray marks everywhere. So just the manual, we don't need this. Processor itself. I'm not sure if this is visible. 5900X. Let's go back to the socket. All right, so we're gonna just swap this out. We're gonna take the other one, we're gonna first take this one out, so we're gonna lift the arm over and up, and then we're gonna gently pull the processor up. This one has pins on it, so you wanna put the processor, if you need to put it temporarily down somewhere, you can put it this way, which is the pins facing up. I'm just gonna put that on the paper towel for right now. Now, I just got stuff on my gloves, so you'll wanna wipe that off or swap gloves. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this processor and put it down. Again, do not touch the pins, try not to. And you're gonna put the processor with the arrow facing the proper direction. I think it goes this way. Yeah. Arrow, there's a dot on the board. So we're just gonna drop it in the same spot. Should just slide right in. You shouldn't have to put any force on it. If you force it and you break pins, you're gonna make a mistake and you're gonna have to get a new processor. Getting a new processor is a pain, especially if you have physical damage. AMD will probably not warranty it if it has physical damage. Now I'm just gonna take this other processor, since it's still good, and put it back in its little case cover here. Now this is a 3900X. This is the one that has a problem with Zenbleed, so we are replacing it for that reason. Now I'm just wiping my gloves off. I don't want to keep changing gloves because gloves are expensive. So I'm just going to wipe it off, all the thermal paste that I got on here. Some new thermal paste, and we're going to apply it to the processor. You don't need to use so much. I use enough just to cover the processor. I kind of do an X. You guys can do dots if you want. It's going to probably spread just as good. If you have a larger processor, you'll want to do like a spreader. It's like just basically like a little plastic, what is it, like a little plastic, it's like a little plastic spatula. I can't speak today. Plastic spatula that basically allows you to spread that all around. So you can use that if you want. I just use the pressure, but if you have a very large processor, you'll want to spread it around a little bit so that you get a more even coat, because even with the pressure, it may not actually give you a full even coat. If you're unsure, just use a spatula, and just it's like a little plastic spatula, or you can use like a straw, and just cut it down. If you really don't have a plastic spatula. I'm gonna wash my hands a little bit more here before I go to touch the cooler, because I don't want to get this on the cooler. By the way, this gray stuff, this is thermal paste. You don't want to have that on the cooler. So if you have it on your gloves, it'll go to the cooler. It will make a mess. So you don't want to have gray spots all over your cooler. You'll want to not do that. So Of course, the minute I say it, I'm going to end up with some sort of gray spot on it. Now this is going to go back over the top and lay back down right onto it. Be careful of the cabling. You don't want the cabling going into the paste or anything like that. You want to try to go as straight down as possible. Line it over the spots that need to be. I like to give it a little push down. Don't push too hard. You should be able to push straight down. If you can skip that step if you don't want to, because you can always just tighten down the screws and it will automatically push down anyway. But I like to give it a little push so it doesn't move on me while I'm putting the screws on. So put the screws on. Don't tighten down until you get all the screws on, and you'll want to tighten down in a crisscross pattern. Not the way that I'm screwing it down right now. You'll see what I'm going to do when I go to tighten it down. So now we're ready to tighten down, kind of. Just going to make sure they're all on there. They're not weird or anything. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to basically hold down the all-in-one heatsink down to the platform, screw down one side, then you're going to go to the opposite corner, screw that down, and then go to the opposite corner and do the same thing for this side. If you notice, my screwdriver is making a clicking noise. The reason why is because I have it set to 17 for the strength. At that point, it will not torque past 17. Some screwdrivers are certain different ones. If you really want to test it, you can. I don't really care for all that much of a testing, just as long as it catches and it doesn't move and it doesn't strip the screws. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the reverse. We're just going to plug back everything in. At this point, you could take the gloves off. Gloves, you really don't need the gloves at this point, so I'm just going to ditch those. And we're just going to plug back everything into the proper sockets. Now this one is the USB connection. Unfortunately, it's a micro USB, which is a pain to line up and plug in. After it's plugged in, it'll be like that. These cables, I'm gonna have to put one of this cable I think is just for the fan. Let me just double check. Yeah, this is for the regular pump connection, so just that goes right to pump on where it was before. What is interesting is that there is no CPU connection here, so we might have to double check the BIOS and make sure that the fan configuration is correct, because when you're running with a pump, you need to let it know that it is a pump, or the fans will never turn on, and or maybe the pump may not run correctly with the proper amount of power. So in that case, you'll want to make those changes in the BIOS, which I'm going to do once the system is online. By the way, if you've noticed, there is a CPU header here, and there is also a pump header. I have it plugged into the pump because that's what this is. The fans are on a splitter. It's kind of hard to see. This is on a splitter. This is going to the back because that's where all the rest of the fan connections are. Normally you would plug it into wherever you have it if you don't want to use the other more advanced coloring and stuff. This is also for the screen as well as for powering some of the colored fans, which we're going to go to right now. We're going to go bring this back. You have to rerun the wires again. The reason why I didn't tuck this wire in yet is because I want to get these two big wires through the small little hole here and get it through to the other side, which is a pain to see on camera. I am sorry, but it is just the way it is. If I can find it. All right. This is always a pain. If you do an all-in-one cooler, I do recommend getting a bigger case. This case is kind of small for this, and the holes don't exactly line up. The hole here, the whole slide over is over here, but the hole for actually going to the back is over here. So they don't really line up. They kind of just barely miss each other. That's why I'm gonna have to kind of like slide this along and hope for the best, because I don't really want to take apart all the fans to get in there to replace this stupid cable. It's gonna be a pain. There we go. Kind of. Get over there. This is very tricky. Newer cases, this is really an older case, by the way, but newer cases, you should have really no problem with this. There shouldn't, you know, the holes really line up better. So we're gonna do the same thing for the second cable. This might be a little harder because it is a flimsier cable. The other one was more kind of a straight cable. So this is going to be a little more difficult to get along. Maybe I should have taped them together. There we go, got it. Okay, got it. All right. And now what you're gonna do is we're gonna just tuck back all the other cables underneath the heat sinks and stuff like that. I'm not gonna tie these down because they're really hard to unclip. And it just doesn't make any sense. No one's seen them. They're behind this little fan here anyway. It really doesn't matter. So on the back, we're going to not break anything. All right, we're going to just basically reconnect all these cables. To reconnect, it's just going to match up the SATA one with the SATA cable. That's connected, and then you're just going to connect the two fans that were connected before back into this. Just a pass through, but it works fine. This is stupid. I don't know why this is that way. This should be over here a little bit. Maybe the cable's moved on me. This is gonna be a pain to close. Let's close this side first and hope for the best, and it won't break on me. It's a little dirty, but I really should probably clean this up a little. That cabling mess down there is all the RGB stuff. That's why, like, I really hate RGB because it, you know, it's a lot of freaking cables and power and lights and fans, and we charge more for RGB because to do a build because of the fact of that one aspect. I try to tell people out of it because honestly, I don't like it myself. I like the colors, I just don't like the extra work involved to getting it to be back to working correctly. So the system's a little dirty, but let me see if there's any other fan cleanouts. It's not that bad. The fans are still pretty clean. It was just the side cover that has a little bit of dust, so maybe I might just need to clean out the filter, which I'm gonna do really quickly. The filter on this one is on the bottom. It's just a quick clean out. I'm just gonna get a vacuum or something and vacuum that off. Closing up, we're just gonna take the glass side panel, carefully put it back on, line it up with the holes, and we're gonna put the screws back in. Now with glass, this is tempered glass, so you gotta be very, safety glass basically. You gotta be very careful not to over tighten screws and stuff on it, because you will end up cracking it, and when you crack this type of glass, it breaks into like very small little itty bitty pieces, and it makes a real mess, and it's really hard to clean up. And on top of it, you need another panel. So it's a real lovely chore, so just be careful not to do that. We're gonna take some Windex and just wash this off a little bit. But let's make sure everything boots first. First thing you're gonna do is wanna go to the BIOS. May need to detect a new processor, so it may take a minute. This is normal. There it goes. BIOS is coming up. It may also reboot twice. This is normal because the processor has changed. Okay, so now it says the CPU or memory has been cleared. Do you want to go into the BIOS? We're going to go into the BIOS, and we're going to make a few little quick changes to how the system is running. I also noticed that my screen on my cooler is not working. Temperature wise, let's double check the temperature. I'm also noticing the fans are not running on the radiator, so that's not good. So something's probably wrong with the radiator. or, I mean not the radio, I'm sorry, it's probably wrong with the fan connector, or we have a problem with the smart controls on the fan and maybe it's not just running on the proper ones. So we're gonna go to hardware monitor for a second. CPU 1 is off, pump 1 is on, system 1 on, but the fans are actually not running. Yeah, system 1, 2, 3, and 4 all have RPMs and the pump has got an RPM, but chipset's got 0 and CPU 1's got 0, but CPU 1's not plugged in, so something's wrong with the system. I'm gonna have to go shut it back off and then do some diagnostics and figure out why it's not powering on. Okay, I got the system back up and running. I missed one of the plugs over here. This plug here was actually disconnected. I had to push it all the way down. It didn't clip all the way in, but all the fans are now running. They are running by temperature. The LED is lighting up. All the little LEDs and colorful RGB is all working, so we all know it's running fast. Anyway, yeah, graphic card's working. Everything's working. We're back to the main OS. And new BIOS, new processor, and everything is operational.